That's what I want to show you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Osman Ahmed doing MA drawing at Camberwell College of Art. Today we are talking about Anfal and the work I've been developing. And my first guest is George Haji. This is George Haji. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. My name is George Haji and I'm going to talk about the Anfal operation, why and how it occurred. First of all, I must say that all the information that I am presenting today here based on eyewitness, because I was Peshmerga freedom fighter before Anfal and during Anfal and after Anfal as well. And I was lucky enough, after I arrived in United Kingdom in the late 1990s, in 1992, I was offered a job of researcher with Human Rights Watch to go through and analyze some 16 tons of captured Iraqi documents back in America to bring the case of genocide against the state of Iraq. And I stayed there for 2 years and I went through and sifted through all the 16 tons of captured Iraqi documents, and I found hundreds, perhaps thousands of very interesting documents, and I'm using these documents or the information that I'm presenting today based on those documents as well as my eyewitness. Anfal is one of those events that left big marks on my life personally. I witnessed the start of the first stage of Anfal. I witnessed people setting fire to their houses and setting their houses alight before leaving because they didn't want the Iraqi army to lay their hands on their properties and loot them. I myself burned my own home too. I witnessed the exodus of thousands of families from the village of Japati valleys in a very cold and snowy winter through the icy corridors of Jilwan and Assos mountains towards the Iranian border. I saw people leaving their dead mothers and fathers in the snow, frozen in the snow. And the images of that journey were more like scenes one would see in a movie rather than in real life. During that sad journey, and behind a big rock in the snow, I saw a woman giving birth to a baby boy. When we talk about Anfal, it won't be an ample and comprehensive without talking about the recent history of Kurds. History has not been very kind to the Kurds. Many of you will know that. The Kurds were given empty promises in the past and have subsequently been betrayed. On 10th of August 1920, following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and according to the Treaty of Sèvres, the Kurds were promised an independent state. But instead, their land, Kurdistan, was carved up into 4 pieces instead, according to Lausanne Treaty, which was signed on 24th of 7, 1923. On 16th of December 1925, the current Iraqi Kurdistan, which was called Mosul's Emirate, under the Ottoman Empire, was given to the then newly created state of Iraq against the will and consent of the Kurds. Ever since, there had been numerous attempts by the Kurds to persuade the Iraqi governments to recognize their rights as a nation living on their own land. The attempts were in the form of protests, demonstrations, uprising, and armed struggle as well. They were promised by the Iraqi governments in 1958 when the monarchy was toppled in Iraq. Soon, the new Iraqi government turned against them and started a vicious military operation against them. It continued to the late 80s of the last century. One must admit that the attacks by Ba'athist Party in 1963 and later after they regained power in 1968 were the most barbaric ones. Ba'athist Party is a chauvinist Arab party that considers the Kurds as an ethnic minority living on Arab lands. It also looks at them as one of the perils that threaten the national security of the Arab nation and Iraq. Therefore, it was always planning to eliminate that peril. However, in 1970, when the Kurdish movement was at its peak, the Iraqi regime signed a treaty with the Kurds and stopped fighting and started negotiating autonomy for the Kurds within Iraq. The leadership of Ba'ath's party needed a pause to the fighting to brace their grip on the power in Iraq, not because they believed in giving the Kurds their rights. The negotiation lasted for 4 years before it was ended by the regime. An intensive fighting broke out soon after that between Iraq and the Kurds. Iraq destroyed hundreds of villages and killed thousands of Kurds. However, the fierce resistance shown by the Kurds made the Iraqi regime think about another method to end the Kurdish movement. On 6th of March 1975, Saddam signed the Algiers Treaty with the Shah of Iran. Iraq gave all the disputed lands to the Iranian in return to abandoning the Kurds, so the Kurdish movement collapsed. The Iraqi regime tried to capitalize on the collapse of the Kurdish movement. The regime carried out the following measures: deportation of tens of thousands of Kurds to the south and middle of Iraq, resumption of intensive Arabization, and by Arabization I mean deporting the Kurds and the Kurdish families from their villages and towns to other areas and replace them with Arab tribes brought from the south and middle of Iraq. Execution of tens of Kurds without a fair trial, destruction of 1,242 villages on the border with Iran, Syria and Turkey, and they forced the Kurds to join the ranks of the Ba'athist party against their will, and they prevented the Kurds from getting sensitive and important posts within the government. Despite all those measures, the Kurdish movement continued and armed struggle was resumed again. And it continued until the uprising of 1991 following the Anfal campaign, and many people witnessed the mass exodus of the Kurds in 1991 to the mountains of Turkey and Iraq. When we talk about the Iraqi policy, okay, this is the situation in Iraq as I explained earlier, the Arabization, the oppression and execution, and then we talk about the preparation for Anfal. The situation on the ground was that Iraq continued with its scorched earth policy, Arabization, village destruction, deportation, and many other measures. Nevertheless, the Kurdish nationalism developed even further. Then it was the Iranian Revolution. The overthrow of the Shah was another blow to the Iraqi regime. In September 1980, Iraq launched a massive military attack on Iran. Iran-Iraq war did not finish as quickly as Saddam predicted or wished for. Instead, it lasted for 8 years and drained Iraq's financial reserve, military capacity, and human resources. Iran-Iraq war left big marks on the whole situation in Iraq and had significant implications on Kurdistan and the Kurdish movement. Tens of thousands of Kurds refused to join the army when they were called for duty in the front lines with Iran. Many more thousands left the ranks of Iraqi army. Subsequently, the Kurdish movement gained momentum and people were more openly defying the authority of the regime. That's why in 1982, a series of anti-regime demonstrations happened in most of the cities and towns of Kurdistan. People demanded an end to the atrocious policy of the regime against the Kurds. Iraqi regime wanted to set up kind of a political command center in the north of Iraq, which is Iraqi Kurdistan, to monitor the situation closely and implement the Iraqi policy against the Kurds properly. They decided to open a regional office for the Ba'athist party, the ruling party, in the city of Kirkuk, called the Northern Bureau of Ba'athist Party. That's the Northern Bureau of Ba'athist Party. Northern Bureau of Ba'athist Party, as I had mentioned earlier, was both legislative and executive body to run the political, military, security, and administrative affairs of north of Iraq, Kurdistan, through a number of orders and directives. The Secretary of Northern Bureau had to be a member of the leadership of Ba'athist Party in Iraq and was appointed by the Iraqi so-called